So this is another exposition, one take. That's how I do. Uh, there's a common practice in media to create a false choice between two options. Maybe there's variants of the two options. They splinter, but there's two options, and both of them are horrible. And we see this over and over again. So I'm going to go into a few examples. I don't want to ramble forever because there's thousands of examples. But a note about where I'm coming from. I didn't enculturate. I didn't ever join your cultures. I've always been thinking by myself, on my own. And I give different answers from all the answers of all your groups. So it's always interesting for me when your groups insist that their side is right and the other side is wrong, when you don't recognize that there are lots of other options in lots of different directions, lots of dimensions of change that you never even consider. The one I'm going to address right now is relating to dating, marriage, relationships, intimacy, love. That whole domain that's very popular right now. A lot of people talking about it. So the two sides that are camping on their ideology are the modern feminist TikTok dating coach side and the manosphere MAGA dating coach side. And both of them are crazy, completely insane. And there's very few voices that are saying anything that we have a scientific backing or that actually form an ethical basis. Very few people are actually saying things that are sane and healthy and loving. So let's look at the manosphere first, because we all like trashing on the manosphere. Everyone who's not in the manosphere loves trashing on it. It's great. The manosphere has a bunch of different clumps, and it started with Rollo Tomasi. That's not his real name. He wanted to sound cool. But it was like a decade and a half ago, this guy went on the dating apps, and he took the women's requirements that they were placing on men on the dating app, and he just swapped the gender. And he wrote a profile that was identical to a woman's profile, except the gender was swapped. And the women, this is a decade and a half ago, beginning of the dating app crisis, women were horrified and declared him misogynistic, just for holding the same set of standards that she held over men. And that's when he said that he would just do that. He would just be the evil that he hated and bite back at women in the same techniques they used. And that was the beginning of the manosphere. The manosphere is a bunch of guys who are using the same techniques that the worst women were using 15 years ago. That's all it is. So you can look at women advising what's called black cat energy. It's a series of tactics to make a man obsessed with you and extract what you want from him. And you go down the list, they are all abusive tactics. They're identical to the abuser cycle and cult indoctrination. And so the manosphere adopted that same set of tactics. Rollo Tomasi called it the dread game. And it's literally just black cat energy. It's identical tactics being used by either gender against the other. The manosphere does the same transactional image obsession that they saw women doing on dating apps on their profiles 15 years ago. So it's transactional means I give you what you want and then you give me what I want, like a business. And that's not a way to have a healthy relationship at all. If there's any transaction idea, this is different from reciprocity, where you both are glad to provide for the other's benefit because you care about them. But if you're keeping score and saying they have to give me what I want or I get rid of them, that is literally objectification. You're treating the other person as a tool to feed you your supply, and there's no way for love to exist in that kind of relationship. So they were doing objectification, transactionalism, and they were also image obsessed, where they're saying the other person has to look the way that I want them to look. They have to make me hot. I've got to feel excitement, limerence, lust, or else they're not worth my time. So it's both of the sides of the heterosexual equation have been doing this for a long time. None of it has ever been healthy. And so the manosphere metastasized from that. Rollo Tomasi's gender swap of women's dating profiles. That's where it all came from. And they're just imitating the worst women. And so that fragmented. There's the red pill, which it's very, very clear. You got to keep in mind, the red pill is not men who are being self-assured, who are being authentic, who are being true leaders. The red pill is a group of men who said, I want the most women to lust after me. And the way I'm going to do that is by changing who I appear to be. I'm going to put on a mask that's not who I really am, that matches her favorite romance novel character. So the red pill, you go down the list, all the things the red pill advises men to become. It's literally just Christian Grey from 50 Shades of Grey. What women lusted after most in their romance fiction, the red pill says men should be what she wants to get maximum number of women attracted to him. That's all it is. Then you have the black pill, where a bunch of guys who don't measure up to the red pill standards gave up and declare defeat, and they say society's doomed. That's the essence of disempowerment. And it doesn't ever result in change or improvement or growth for themselves or anyone else. I don't recommend it. There's also MGTOW, which is a separate strand. That's not really manosphere. MGTOW is men going their own way, and that started 20 plus years ago with an essay online. And those are people who are saying, just be your best self and stop trying to get a relationship by being what they want. Which is actually what couples counselors and relationship therapists and philosophers of love had been saying for a very long time. Just be yourself. And if most people don't want that, then why would you want to be with them? Why would I want to be with someone who I have to put on a mask for them to desire me? So MGTOW is going they're cutting closer to healthy self-expression, self-respect, authenticity. But they make a big mistake where they say that it's about individuality, just being themselves by themselves. And when we look at the long period of human development, 300,000 years that we've been Homo sapiens sapien, we do not see that happening at all. For almost all of the history of human development, we lived as tribes, where we had a whole community that we were born into, and we had a lifelong commitment to them and they to us. We had a sense of belonging, there was mutual compassion, and the leadership in those communities was based on compassion. The reason that a tribe was willing to trust a leader is because they knew that the leader had their own best interests in mind. The tribe's members were saying, our leader is looking out for us, not themselves. So if someone seeks to be hierarchically dominant and exploitative, tribes aren't going to trust that person because that person's in it for themselves. So across most tribes, this is kind of the Venn diagram, there's lots of different tribal behaviors and patterns, but there's a middle point that is overwhelming. Tribes were wise grandmothers. That's who led the tribe. It was a matriarchal system led by wise grandmothers. There are chieftains or big men in numerous tribes. That's usually what happens. The chieftain and the big men are not some manosphere alpha male. The chieftains or the big men, for example, in the Trobriand Islanders in Papua New Guinea, the big man is voted in every year by the whole tribe according to who threw the best feast. He's generous to everyone. And the role was not to command people and they obey. The role was to resolve conflict. So that's a big man. He's generous to everyone and he resolves conflict. And everyone voted on him. And it changes up every year. And what we see in tribes is they didn't have income inequality. There wasn't some rich billionaire in a tribe. So there's this fantasy in both the manosphere and the modern permutation of feminism on TikTok, where they're both claiming that women are seeking men who have status and wealth. And that didn't exist. You were supposed to contribute whatever you could to the whole tribe, and then you take your share. And that was everybody. So if there was some guy with more money than everyone else, the tribe's going to take it back. And if there was some girl who wanted a guy to privilege her and pamper her, the tribe's going to abandon her and let her die alone, because they don't want to put up with someone who's selfish. Neither of those options, neither of the options presented to you in media were anything like the way that humans actually lived for 98% of our history. So Manosphere has these different fragments. All of them are either trying to appease the worst women's romance fantasies, that's the red pill, or they're giving up on ever meeting that fantasy, that's the black pill, or the Rollo Tomassi side of it is using the same tactics that the worst women were using previously. They still use it. And then there's the TikTok feminists. I'm an old school feminist. I advocate matriarchy. Grandma's in charge sounds pretty good to me, because we can all trust that she has our best interests in heart. The TikTok feminists are saying things that are actually the opposite of what my old school feminists were saying for decades. The idea that a woman should find a rich man to feed her privileges is dependency on a rich man. That's not feminism. And the idea that you just abandon society and go it your own to prove yourself as a strong, independent person, that's denial of community. So none of the options being presented in that sphere are actually healthy or supportive of a positive community structure, of loving and belonging. Neither of these options resolve the gender war. They're all exacerbating the gender war. So the idea that a man should pay for the first date to prove that he's willing to be a provider, it's really weird, because in a tribe, that wouldn't happen. If a man was hunting and he came back with a kill, the best piece of meat was given to the arrowhead maker. And then the other pieces of meat were parceled out amongst the relatives, amongst the tribe. So if he was privileging his crush, that's selfishness. They wouldn't tolerate that. So you've only got two options in your conversation. Your filter bubbles are one or the other of these two options, and both of them are horribly wrong and bad. And we see that again and again in the kinds of framing that people are using in the conversation, where they say, be unloving because someone else was unloving. So there's this weird idea that if there was a bad person on earth, then that justifies me being bad. I get to be bad because they were bad. No one who's ethical makes that argument. No one who actually has compassion and virtue says, I get to be bad because they were bad. The only people who want to be bad, the only people who are looking for an excuse to justify themselves being bad, are bad people. So go look at both of those sides of the conversation, where the men are saying, here's this woman who is horrible, so we get to be horrible, and women who are saying, here's this guy who is horrible, so we get to be horrible. Both of those talking heads are unethical. Neither of them will ever have a healthy, loving relationship, because they're justifying being evil just because someone else on earth was evil. I'll post more details later. This is long enough.